Hey everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with our weekly update on social media. Thanks for joining us this week. Obviously, I'm not in our typical studio at the Judicial Watch headquarters in DC, but I'm in an undisclosed location, and I thought it was important to take a break from my meeting that I'm attending to give you a special update on the Durham report, the consequences, the non-consequences, and my immediate reaction to what is in many ways a consequential report, but also a failure in terms of accountability. Plus, we have new information on misconduct at the Naval Academy at the highest levels. You're going to want to hear more about that. Plus, we're in a big court fight in Tennessee over the manifesto of that murderer of those children and those other innocents at the Covenant School a little bit ago. So I'll provide you the latest on the court fight there. Plus our whistleblower client in the FBI, or who's now kind of out of the FBI, testified along with some other whistleblowers on the Hill in a dramatic hearing. I'll provide you an update and a highlight or two from that as well. But first up is the Durham report. In many ways, there's a lot of government corruption that's been exposed in this Durham report. Much of which has already been exposed thanks to Judicial Watch's heavy lifting to uncover the worst corruption scandal or elements of the worst corruption scandal in American history, which is the unlawful, illicit, abusive political targeting of President Trump, the spying on President Trump, the abuse of President Trump that began during his candidacy, continued into his presidency, and I would submit continues to this day. John Durham was first hired by William Barr to investigate these various issues in 2019. He was just a regular U.S. attorney, and he was hired to just look at this, so he wasn't special counsel. And then he was, at the end of the Trump's term, Barr elevated him or made him a special counsel, which included the additional requirement as a result of his being special counsel that he issue a report, right? But in the end, what did we want from Mr. Durham? I don't know about you. I didn't want a report. Judicial Watch could write a report. Congress could write a report. The media can write a report. We wanted prosecutions. And on the prosecution front, Durham is a big fat fail. There's no way to slice it other than to conclude that the legal side of the accountability ledger is lacking. There were three prosecutions, one against the FBI lawyer, Klein Smith, who manipulated information in emails to suggest that Carter Page was not a CIA cooperator, basically an asset of the government, to make it easier to spy on him. It was a lie. He messed with not only his colleagues, but with the FISA courts to get this spy application by falsifying a record. And he got a slap on the wrist, right? And then there were two other prosecutions, one of the Clinton campaign lawyer, Sussman, who was accused by Durham of lying to the poor FBI and suggesting that he had information about this a fraud story they had come up with about the Trump banks having some sort of connections to Russia. And the FBI was victimized because they didn't know he was working for Hillary. Well, the jury didn't really buy that, and they acquitted him. Doesn't mean he didn't lie. It didn't mean that there was misconduct there. But that was a failed prosecution. And then there was Igor Danchenko, who was the Russian intelligence asset by all accounts, further confirmed in this report, that Hillary Clinton had hired through Fusion GPS. So he was working for Fusion GPS, and he concocted and made up, according to Durham and testimony at the trial, all these false allegations that became key parts of the Steele dossier that was used again to justify spying on Trump and other misconduct against him. Frankly, it resulted in a special counsel that should never have been appointed, the Mueller special counsel. It was an attack on the Trump presidency like we've never seen before. And Danchenko, he was acquitted as well. He was an FBI asset, and he was accused of again, lying and misconduct, and the jury didn't buy it. What was kept out of those trials were the guys truly responsible for it, in my view: Hillary Clinton, Obama, the rest, and all of that. And there's no indication that Durham ever seriously considered indicting or let alone prosecuting these folks. I'm not seeing any evidence anyone's brought before a grand jury. I guess Hillary Clinton at least was questioned by Durham. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But the Durham report, now, the bad part is the Durham report didn't result in the sort of accountability that we desired. So I'll try to describe as best I'm able from this 300 plus page report. And I encourage you to read it. It's readable. It's accessible. I think it's important you know about it and you understand it, because the media will try to downplay it. The left will try to downplay it. Obviously, the Democratic Party, that is in part criminally responsible for this, literally through the Democratic National Committee, they have an interest in downplaying it because it's important you know what these agencies were up to, because there's been no accountability, no real check on what they've done. There's been no consequence any significant consequence for the abuses of Trump and other innocents. So I would suggest, as a citizen, you have a positive moral obligation when given this opportunity, this unique opportunity to see this insight into this massive corruption, to read it. And so we'll provide a link to it below. But the summary of it is, some of which is, as I said, largely been uncovered by Judicial Watch already, and obviously Devin Nunes and some other intrepid reporters and investigators outside of Congress as well. And then you had internal investigations by the IG of the Justice Department and other offices in the FBI and DOJ, et cetera. And some of it has already been released in terms of the details through this trial process that I talked about earlier. So what does it show? There was never good faith-based reason for the FBI to open up Crossfire Hurricane, which essentially was the spy operation, the counterintelligence operation against Donald Trump in the summer of 2016. Of course, this operation was opened up personally by Peter Strzok at the directions of senior officials in the FBI, and they began this unprecedented spy operation on Trump based on the barest pieces of evidence that wouldn't justify this extraordinary spy operation against a normal citizen, let alone a sensitive subject like a presidential campaign or people around him. But that's what they did, and Durham concluded there really was no basis to fairly open the investigation. And of course, the collusion scandal, Durham reaffirmed that there turned out to be no basis for it at all, despite incredible resources being thrown out, the Trump team. You had recordations made. You had literal in-person spying made of Trump people. You had the Steele dossier created by the Clinton campaign. They ran every lead down they thought they could there, except the leads that would obviously should have been run down, that would have quickly shown that there was no basis for it. But even what they were doing showed that there was no there when it came to the Steele dossier. The report details how they were willing to give $1 million to one of the Steele dossier people. I forget if it was Christopher Steele or Danchenko, if he could just come up with some dirt to justify or to solidify the allegations that were obviously false in the Steele dossier. And I say obviously false because, many of you probably haven't read the Steele dossier. I have. And when you read it, you can see it's ridiculous. It's hysterical conspiracy theories that don't make sense on their face and should be met with a significant amount of skepticism. But in addition to the on its face incredible nature of the material, it turns out, and again, there have been reports to this effect before, but it's fleshed out in the Durham report, that everyone knew it was really unlikely to be true because they had intelligence that Hillary Clinton, her campaign, was concocting information tying Trump to Russia to distract from her own problems, namely her email scandal. So their intelligence was, we know Hillary's going to make stuff up about Trump to try to keep herself out of jail, more or less, and mitigate the political consequences of her email misconduct. Now, the FBI knew, the CIA knew, Trump knew, Joe Biden knew, all the president's men, all the president's women in a position of responsibility knew this. And yet they still allowed this malicious spy material, this steal material, to be used to justify spying against Trump. And, as I said before, and as Judicial Watch first detailed, because we were the first ones to get the actual FISA warrants, the FISA warrants were full of lies and misleading statements and made omissions of material information. Material information means if the information was there, the court may have decided differently, right? Like, for instance, telling the court directly, well, this is Hillary's stuff, and we want to spy on Trump because Hillary thinks, she came up with this stuff that he was involved with the Russians, and so we're going to spy on Carter Page and indirectly the whole Trump team. And that, of course, all that was left out. I think the final count in the FISA warrant misstatements and other, quote, knowing errors was 17 over 4 FISA statements of 4 FISA requests. FISAs began being issued just before the campaign, and they continued 1, 2, 3, 4 into the first year of the Trump presidency. And they all knew that it was Hillary that had made this up, and she had political reasons that were obvious, but they had intelligence literally that there were political reasons. And according to the Durham report, John Brennan, the CIA director under Obama, briefed Obama, Biden, and other top people in the Biden White House, Obama White House, that this was Hillary's plan. And this briefing, I think, took place in August of 2016. So they're pretending that there's all this evidence that they knew was coming from the Clinton campaign. So it wasn't like they knew the Steele dossier. It wasn't like, and I'm kind of paraphrasing the Durham report and just general, my general understanding of the issue. They all knew the Steele report had provenance with the Hillary Clinton campaign. And so on top of that, they had separate intelligence that she was setting and going to make stuff up to make Trump look bad vis-a-vis Russia. And they didn't express any skepticism with the Steele operation as a result. And those who had skepticism, it was all ignored. Because as Durham highlights, and it kind of fails to connect the dots, at least prosecutorially, highlights the anti-Trump animus of people like Strzok and Page and Klein Smith, who was the guy who was ultimately indicted for actually manipulating information and changing documents to try to get these FISA warrants. So it's just incredible corruption. And this is the epitome of election interference. Trump had his civil rights violated to the degree there was collusion with government agencies to target him because of his candidacy. It was a violation of law 6 ways to Sunday. I don't know why. I understand the difficulty of prosecuting cases like this. But when you have all this information that Durham had, that these folks knew better and had reason to know better, yet still targeted him on specious reasons, how is that not a crime? Now, he says just because it's unethical doesn't mean we can prove it a crime. Color me skeptical. And, of course, it continued into the Trump presidency, these FISA warrants. A lot of this misconduct continued under the Mueller operation. So the Mueller operation was also compromised by this corruption. So the special counsel, frankly required, in the end, a special counsel investigation. That's how corrupt things were at the FBI and Justice Department, and indirectly the CIA. Now, a lot of folks didn't cooperate with the Durham investigation. Comey didn't cooperate. Peter Strzok cooperated on one aspect of it, but basically refused to cooperate on other aspects of it. And I'm curious, so what is the lack of cooperation? Did they get a grand jury subpoena? Did they take the fifth? Or was it just like an IG investigation, an Inspector General's investigation, where, if you don't cooperate, there's really no way to compel you to cooperate if you're not a government employee? So I'm just curious about that. And my concern about this report is that it's kind of a glorified administrative review. Reporters are going to stop Comey, and, some of these other folks are working for left-wing media companies and, have high-profile voices in the media in attacking the rule of law and continuing to abuse Trump. And so without the prosecutions, where's the incentive for these agencies and people who are otherwise tempted again to abuse power to target their political opponents? Where's the incentive for them not to do it? And I would argue that the current investigations of Trump are more of the same. Politicized uses of the FBI and Justice Department, misusing the law contrary to evidence, with no evidentiary justification, to try to jail Trump. And that's what happened with Comey and Mueller and Schiff and all the rest. They all knew it was a lie, and yet they tried to use the powers of government to destroy Trump, and for using law enforcement, spy apparatus and such. And it's a real outrage and it's a real disappointment. I know a lot of folks are excited about the report. I think it's really interesting. I think it's a devastating amount of detail about the corruption at the FBI and Justice Department. The question is, what's to be done about it? And at the end of the report, Durham essentially says, well, maybe we can hire someone at the FBI to monitor these issues and make sure they don't happen again. Well, they already have people at the FBI who are supposed to be monitoring these issues. There are already rules in place to prevent the abuse. And Durham says, he kind of throws up his hands. He goes, well, I could come up with new rules. We could come up with new rules. But if we got bad guys working in the FBI who don't want to follow rules, what good is that going to do? And I would respond, then you prosecute them. You don't let them go. Not only Durham kind of failed and dropped the ball in that regard, Bill Barr. You had Comey leak Trump's FBI files, no prosecution. You had McCabe lie repeatedly in investigations related to the Clinton Foundation and leaks and such, no prosecution. So what's to stop? What's the check? Maybe some of them lost their jobs, but certainly not enough. And many of the bad guys either, left voluntarily or are still there. And as I said, it's largely continuing. So I would submit that it's actually expanded. They're using the January 6th, for instance, as a pretext to target all sorts of Americans, not just Trump, over, they're exercising their First Amendment rights when they came to either protesting an election dispute or, working within the system to dispute an election. So these abuses continue. And the Durham report is a fail in that regard, but it is a public service in the sense of putting in one place a lot of, as I said, the information we know. Now, what's new in there, or at least what's new to me, and I can't say for sure it's not new to you, and it may be not new to others because it's somewhere buried out there in the media domain. It's the corruption of Hillary Clinton. What's new in there is that the Durham tried to make the point that as they were just going full throttle against Trump for no reason and any reason, that when they had significant actual evidence of criminal wrongdoing by the Clinton gang, they actually curtailed the investigation of Hillary Clinton. For instance, gave her a defensive briefing because they were worried about foreign nationals targeting her. No defensive briefings for Donald Trump. But even worse, it looks like obstructed investigations, for instance, into the Clinton Foundation. We knew about this generally, but we have those specifics. He had 3 different U.S. attorneys' offices investigating information related to pay to play at the Clinton Foundation tied to the State Department, generated through Judicial Watch materials initially. And what happened is you had senior level interference to slow down and curtail those investigations. They brought those, they shut down or took out the authority of some of the offices to do anything to try to centralize the investigation in a way that allowed them essentially to shut it down and curtail it. And for instance, they had information that there were, hundreds of thousands of dollars related to a bribery scheme tied to Hillary Clinton's foundation. And they did nothing with it. I mean, Hillary Clinton still has, significant evidence of criminal conduct that hasn't been pursued by the Justice Department, as confirmed in the Durham report. And the incredible thing is, I talked to you about this scheme by the Clinton campaign and Hillary to manufacture these false charges against Trump to distract from her own the other evidence of criminality. Really, that came out thanks to Judicial Watch. Judicial Watch is kind of like in the background of a lot of this because, first of all, we got a lot of the information that Durham followed up on 4 years later. But for instance, the Clinton emails, the foundation, pay to play, all that is because of Judicial Watch disclosures and litigation. We uncovered the emails, we uncovered the information about the pay to play. And so that's because of Judicial Watch. And because of that, Hillary was put in a box. She was facing the prospect of criminal prosecution. Obviously, there was an investigation that I think only proceeded only because Judicial Watch was doing a separate investigation and the FBI had to keep up. And so they manufactured these fake charges against Donald Trump. And she was questioned about it. And I think what a lot of media have missed is that she didn't deny it. And I'm going to read to you, and I'm going to actually show you the part of the report where she's questioned, or the report about her questioning occurs. During an interview, here it is down here. You'll see this. Wait, hold on. I haven't shared it yet. Let me share. I'm going to show you this by sharing it. Hold on 1 second. Let me make sure I'm sharing it appropriately. Give me a second. And share. Okay, so you should see it. So this is page 99 in the PDF version of the report. And let me see here. I gotta search rabbit hole. That's the phrase I'm looking for because that's what Hillary said. During an interview with former Secretary Clinton, the office, the Special Counsel office, asked if she had reviewed the information declassified by Director of National Intelligence Ratcliffe regarding her alleged plan to stir up a scandal between Trump and the Russians. Now, Ratcliffe had described this in a declassified document around this time. Ratcliffe worked for Trump. Clinton stated it was really sad, but I get it. You have to go down every rabbit hole. She said that it looked like Russian disinformation to me. They're very good at it, So she was saying that the intelligence, allegedly, which came from Russia, was just disinformation, or she suggested it was. Clinton advised that she had a lot of plans to win the campaign, and anything that came into the public domain was available to her. Now, do you see anything in that paragraph where she denies the issue, where she denies they made stuff up to distract from her email criminality? I don't see anything. So I think that's really important. And, it's confirmation that Hillary knew. I don't know why we would think she didn't know. There's other documents showing when they're talking to, people, Steele and people around him. One of the notes say, let me go back here, stop sharing, that HC knew, obviously Hillary Clinton knew. So that's the other big takeaway here, is that this wasn't something done by people who are outside her control, that she was briefed, she knew, the special counsel questioned her, she had an opportunity to deny, that there was no truth to this scheme. And you can see what she used. She just used language that it wasn't even a non-denial denial. It was just a non-responsive answer. Were you involved in this? Did you see this? Was it true? And she didn't answer the question. So, what conclusion do you draw from that, dear listener, dear viewer? She did it. And I've been pushing out the tweet recently. I've done it before. Clinton knew, Biden knew. Of course, he was brief, we should recall. Obama knew, Brennan knew, Comey knew, Rosenstein knew, McCabe knew. All the deep state knew that Trump was innocent. And as Durham describes, they pursued him anyway. And no charges. Now, I don't know about you. I find that to be insufficient. And in the least, Congress should move to defund the FBI. I don't think it's redeemable. Defund it in whole or part, whatever can get passed. I don't know. Make sure that people involved who are still working there are no longer working there. There's a technique they can use legislatively to defund specific positions. And if they can't fire them, change the law to make it easier to be fired. So there's all sorts of opportunities. Of course, you can impeach people. You could impeach Biden. He was heavily involved in this issue. The part of the Mueller part of this scheme involved falsely suggesting that Manafort and had these shady ties to Ukraine. And, this is all goes back to the Biden-Ukraine issue. And it was the basis for, it helped lead to that hoax impeachment, the impeachment about nothing by Schiff and Company. And Schiff, for instance, he was out there saying, there's evidence there was collusion. There was never any evidence there was collusion. And he was lying. There was evidence he was lying. So what are they going to do about Schiff? He abused his office. Some of them suggested that he should be expelled from the House of Representatives for his lies related to this. And I think that's well worth debating in the least. And of course, this is just the beginning in terms of Judicial Watch's investigations, because there's a whole new set of documents we want, right? We want to know more about Clinton corruption, because she's not going away. I mean, everyone who thinks Hillary's done with politics, they're smoking something. Because I tell you, if Joe Biden ends up not running for presidency, and that's not, it's probably there's a certain chance that happens. Do you think that Hillary Clinton's just going to sit on the sidelines? I mean, she's a significant political figure and remains very active in public policy and politics, and there's got to be accountability. And I'm not sure about the statute of limitations on some of these crimes, whether everything is passed or not. But if I were the next president, I would aggressively review the file of Durham and all the files to see what crimes potentially can be pursued that he was too afraid to pursue on his own. So those are the challenges. You can bet Judicial Watch will be front and center in continuing to investigate this issue, because as I said, it hasn't stopped. This same gang continues to abuse the rule of law to try to jail their political opponents without basis. And that's the way to end our republic, to kind of just transform our national security establishment into a political operation designed to suppress dissent. That's un-American, and that will change the country in a way that we may not be able to recover from. So there's urgency here, and Judicial Watch is dead serious about pursuing it. And I got to say, I'm looking at this Durham report, and what's so frustrating is so much of it Judicial Watch has exposed. We exposed the FISA warrants. We exposed Bruce Orr and Nellie Orr. Remember those two? He was the DOJ official. His wife, Nellie, worked for Fusion GPS, and he was running his own operation against Trump, allowing his wife special access to DOJ and Steele. He was working with Steele as well, even after Steele was seen to be of the Steele dossier, a sketchy character. I mean, all sorts of, and of course, where Bruce Orr was in the Justice Department, he should have had no part in this. It was completely outside his purview. It's like it was all hands on deck for the deep state to target and abuse Trump. And so the deep state needs to be purged of this criminality, and it needs to be defunded in a way so that they're never able to try to destroy democracy and interfere in elections again. And so Judicial Watch, I'm going to read you my statement that we issued because I think it's worth putting on the record for you here, so you know that what we think good about it and what we think bad about it. As I said, this is damning information. According to the Durham report, President Obama's CIA Director John Brennan, then Vice President Joe Biden, and the Attorney General at the time, Loretta Lynch, and the infamous former Director of the FBI, James Comey, was briefed in August 2016 about the plan by Hillary Clinton and the DNC to create a false narrative linking President Trump to Russia. The FBI knew the Steele dossier was a sack of lies, yet they still pushed false allegations in the nefarious FISA warrant applications against Carter Page, who, by the way, is also a crime victim in addition to Trump. They made it a point to try to crush Trump and those around him. It was a purely political banana republic effort to change the course of a presidential election and presidency. And as I described earlier, many key Durham report findings were already disclosed thanks to Judicial Watch, FOIA investigations, and litigations and litigation. Durham let down, though, the American people with few and failed prosecutions. Never in American history has so much government corruption faced so little accountability. Let me be clear, the FBI and Justice Department and their political masters in the Obama White House are responsible for the worst government corruption in American history. President Trump is a crime victim and was targeted by a seditious conspiracy by Obama, Biden, Clinton, and their deep state allies. So you can call it a seditious conspiracy, you can call it a coup, you can call it an attack on the republic, call it whatever you want, but it's the worst government corruption scandal in American history, and it's still happening. And Durham has been a bump in the road to the bad guys. And we need to pick up where we can, and Judicial Watch will, through FOIA and potentially other litigation, to get justice not only for President Trump, but for the American people. And to bring it forward and to kind of show you that the FBI doesn't give a rat's tail about reports, I want to talk about the testimony of Judicial Watch client Marcus Allen, an FBI analyst who was retaliated against for doing his job. He testified to Jim Jordan's Weaponization Committee this week, along with other FBI whistleblowers. The Democrats tried to destroy him to no good effect. They didn't lay a finger on him. They didn't lay a glove on him. And the FBI, just before they testified, issued a report that was designed to try to destroy their reputations. Just so you know, our client, Mr. Allen, had his security clearance suspended. So it wasn't like permanently taken away. And then we filed an IG report, or one of our partners on the outside, Empower Oversight, is also helping us with Marcus's case. They represent him too. Filed an IG investigation request for him. He gets invited to testify to Congress. And what does the FBI do? They leak to the New York Times and issue a report saying we permanently took away his national security clearance, And when you take away a security clearance, you take away the ability of someone like Allen or his colleagues to do their job. And this was a part of a purge of perceived conservatives in the FBI. They didn't like the fact that when it came time after January 6th, Marcus Allen said, let's just keep our heads about ourselves and let's investigate this fairly and thoroughly, and let's not just follow media and left-wing narratives. And for that, he was attacked. And when there was testimony by Chris Wray about government involvement or the potential of federal informants being in the January 6th crowd and part of the disturbance. And he said, let's be careful about the testimony here because we've gotten burned before. Very respectful and direct. And they really went crazy when he did that. And so for doing his job, he's a decorated Marine, and the others are heroes as well. They viciously attacked him. And I want to show you a clip from the hearing. Jim Jordan and the Republicans did a pretty good job. I mean, they really stepped up their game in investigations and oversight this year, thanks in part to the encouragement of Judicial Watch and the leadership of Judicial Watch. They saw what Judicial Watch does, and they want to do it on the Hill as well. So here's a clip of our client, Marcus Allen, telling the truth and standing up against viciousness from the left-wing Democrats who were trying to destroy this patriot.
It appears that I was retaliated against because I forwarded information to my superiors and others that questioned the official narrative of the events of January 6. As a result, I was accused of promoting conspiratorial views and unreliable information. Because I did this, the FBI questioned my allegiance to the United States. Since I was suspended, there's been a dearth of communication from the FBI, with interactions seemingly only being forced by actions from my counsel or members of Congress. For example, I was not even interviewed by anyone from the FBI until May of 2022. I was suspended in January of 2022. This interaction with the FBI happened on the heels of a public statement from a congressional member in early May of 2022. The member made statements indicating the FBI was conducting a purge of employees with conservative viewpoints. Within hours of the public statements, my counsel received a phone call from the FBI wanting to see if they could conduct an interview. Due to whistleblower retaliation by the FBI, I've been suspended without pay for over a year. Thank you to the committee for allowing me time today to convey my concerns about the current FBI. In particular, I am concerned, and I believe this committee should also be concerned about the FBI's use of the security clearance process to retaliate against whistleblowers.
On December 5th, 2022, an account under the name of Marcus Allen retweeted a tweet that said, quote, "Nancy Pelosi staged January 6th, retweet if you agree," end quote. Do you agree with that statement? Yes or no?
No, ma'am. That's not my account at all.
I'm asking whether you agree with that statement, yes or no?
Can you please rephrase the statement?
Yeah. Do you think that Nancy Pelosi staged January 6th? I just want him to answer this last question.
Yeah, he'll answer. I'm just telling you your time's up.
Do you believe that Nancy Pelosi, do you agree with the statement that this person tweeted that Nancy Pelosi staged January 6th? Yes or no?
No.
Thank you.
It's my understanding that the minority in this committee under the rules is entitled to the same testimony, information, documents that the majority is entitled to. So, I mean, I'm not aware that you're able to withhold information from the minority that we would need to use to prepare for.
When it comes to whistleblowers, you're not. And I would just remind the committee, remind everyone. Look, when it comes to whistleblowers, you are not.
That's not right.
It's shocking that the gentleman.
That is not right.
It's shocking
that
the gentleman.
You talk so much about the whistleblower and the impeachment.
It's shocking that the gentleman from New York
all of the information we had.
When you were part of an investigation with an anonymous whistleblower.
You had.
Chair recognizes it's.
I'm inquiring, and I was not.
And I've told you that when it comes to whistleblowers, you are not entitled to it. That's at the discretion of Mr. Allen.
Mr. Chairman, these individuals have been determined not to be whistleblowers. These are not whistleblowers. They've been determined by the agency not to be whistleblowers. Are you deciding that they're whistleblowers?
Yes, the law decides. Did you not listen to Mr. Levitt's testimony? Did you not read the law? The law decides that they are whistleblowers.
So you can see why Judicial Watch is honored to be representing Marcus Allen. And we have a lawsuit on his behalf. The corrupt bureaucrats at the FBI accused him, smeared him by suggesting that he was disloyal to the United States. What corruption to purposefully put that false information in about this decorated veteran and top FBI employee, an award-winning FBI employee, by the way. He had exemplary military and law enforcement experience. He wasn't involved in the January 6 events at all. He just wanted an honest investigation. And as you know, that's not what they wanted. They wanted a witch hunt. And that's why he's now a whistleblower testifying to Congress and facing the end, facing the end of his career, barring intervention by the courts, or, the IG may be taking steps, or the FBI doing the right thing. And for sure, that's unlikely. That's unlikely. So you can go to judicialwatch.org to learn more about Marcus in our case. And we're glad he was able to get his hearing in Congress this week. And that would never have happened, obviously, without our partners, but also without your support. Because of your support, we're able to help folks like Marcus Allen. Not only are they purging conservatives in the FBI and other areas of government, but they're also doing it in the military, believe it or not. And there was a midshipman in the Navy who used in the Naval Academy. And I guess he had issued some tweets or retweeted some material that made his supervisors or his commanders at the Naval Academy upset, and they wanted to drum him out. But that wasn't enough. And we have uncovered how the superintendent for the Naval Academy, the guy running the Naval Academy, really broke ethical rules and norms to target and destroy the career of this midshipman. And Judicial Watch, once again, doing the heavy lifting to ferret out this truth about government corruption at the highest levels. The headline of our press release: Pentagon IG concludes Naval Academy superintendent made false statements in effort to end career of midshipman. So there was a report out. There was a report to Congress, right? And buried in it was this information. The DOD OIG investigated allegations that a Navy vice admiral made false official statements to senior naval officials on 3 occasions. We did not substantiate the allegations. We concluded the vice admiral did not make a false official statement. By the way, a false official statement is different than just lying, right? A false official statement is a legal term, as defined, as they say, by Article 107 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice on any of the 3 occasions. The DOD OIG initiated this investigation based on complaints filed with the DOD hotline. So what Judicial Watch did was we said, give us this IG report. What went on here? And we asked for it. We got the runaround, and we had to sue for it back in March, which began, I guess the report was issued in September 2022. We sued for it in March, and we finally got a redacted version of the report. We'd asked for it back in December. And so March, and now it's May. So I think we got it in the last few weeks. And the report is much different in import than the DOD OIG's dishonest report, it looks like here, to Congress. It's 19 pages of records from the U.S. Department of Defense, consisting of a report we were able to drag out of the Defense Department. And it's written, and the title of it is Report of Investigations of Vice Admiral Sean L. Buck, U.S. Navy Superintendent, U.S. Naval Academy. So the DOD OIG told Congress, well, we investigated a Navy Vice Admiral. They didn't tell Congress he was Superintendent of the Naval Academy. And they concluded that Buck made false statements in discussions with senior Navy officials during disenrollment proceedings against, as I said, this midshipman for perceived inappropriate tweets. The report details that following Vice Admiral Buck's interview with the midshipman, so he had an interview with the midshipman. He didn't like the midshipman's responses. I guess he didn't even like, more importantly, he didn't like the tweets, so he wanted him out. Okay. And I don't think anyone's really questioning his discretion there. Well, I guess others did question his discretion, so I'll get into that. But that wasn't enough. The report shows that he went out of his way to dishonestly state what went on at the meeting in order to justify the disenrollment with responsible officials in the Navy. So the report details that following that interview that I'm talking about with the midshipman, and they redacted the name, so we kind of have to guess who it is, Buck made false statements internally to other Navy officials on 3 separate occasions when he, quote, asserted that the midshipman said he would use military force against civilians. And he didn't say that. He didn't say that. The report also notes that Buck used these false statements to support his recommendation that the midshipman be disenrolled from the academy and be required to reimburse the Navy $174,000, actually $174,753 for his tuition. So the midshipman was facing a significant, not only the end of his career in the Navy, which I'm sure this young man had been working for most of his life, but saddling him and his family with this tuition reimbursement issue. And it was the report was issued by the Whistleblower Reprisal Investigations Directorate, which is part of the Department of Justice's IG office. In a November 2012, 2020 memo, Buck recommended to the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Manpower and Reserve Affairs that the midshipman be disenrolled from the Naval Academy after Buck claimed he had lost confidence in the midshipman. Based on Buck's recommendation, the Secretary of the Navy disenrolled the midshipman from the Naval Academy. However, after the midshipman, he sued, right? You could sue. Everyone can sue. The Navy ultimately allowed him back into the academy to complete his remaining credits, graduate from the academy, and receive a commission as an ensign on May 28, 2021, and enter active duty. So they completely capitulated. A news report by Stars and Stripes suggests the midshipman in question may have been a gentleman by the name of Chase Standage. But the report concludes that we conclude by preponderance of the evidence. Now, the preponderance of the evidence, what does that mean? It means, 50% plus 1. It's more likely than not. We have more evidence, that weighs in favor of it happening than not happening. That Buck did not make a false official statement as defined by Article 107 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. However, we found that he made a statement that was false during both a conference call with someone and an office visit with someone else. They redacted both names. In February of 2021, we further found that Buck knew that his statements were false, but we could not determine by a preponderance of the evidence that Buck intended to make these false statements on either occasion to deceive the 2 individuals that he made the false statements to. I don't know, you make a false statement, it's false, but it wasn't designed to deceive. I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me. I read this stuff and it doesn't make sense to me. And, because it's the government, you're not sure if you're crazy, if the government's crazy. And I just decide it's the government that's crazy. Separately, we concluded that Buck did not make a false official statement to former Secretary Braithwaite. So what he was doing was Buck was going around to these decision makers. In the case of the office meeting that's disclosed, he just shows up at the woman's office. And the woman's kind of horrified because she knew there were issues about his statement being at odds with the written report of what actually occurred at the meeting he had with the midshipman. And so he wasn't satisfied with this official recommendation. He was lobbying, using false statements to try to keep this kid disenrolled and out of the Navy Academy. And of course, what did the IG say? The IG, quote, made no recommendation, unquote, regarding Buck. And the best I can tell, he's still there. These documents show how Pentagon leaders let a vice admiral and the head of the U.S. Naval Academy off the hook for knowingly making false statements to justify his recommendation to end the career of a young midshipman over tweets. And it is disturbing that it took a federal FOIA lawsuit to uncover how the senior officer made a series of false statements as part of this, as I said, unusual effort to destroy the midshipman. So this is today's Navy, folks. And we've talked about how We have the woke Navy and the woke Air Force and the woke Army, and how our academies training our rising leadership are trying to indoctrinate our rising military leaders in woke theory, anti-Americanism, Marxism, etc. But on top of that, they're breaking the rules, it looks like, violating ethical norms, according at least my conclusion, my opinion based on this report, to target folks that tweet out things that are seen as, quote, too conservative. And then when they are found out, the responsible officials try to cover up the misconduct. And this is why Judicial Watch is essential. I mean, we need watchdogs. And, you know, as citizens, we are supposed to provide independent oversight over our government. And that includes the military, which has a special role in our national life. Because we just can't rely on the government to do it. And as citizens, we have to have we have to be jealous protectors of our liberty. And that means holding government accountable, independent of the entities that the government pretends are going to do it for us. And Judicial Watch is your watchdog in Washington. We're effective, and we make history, as I talked about with Durham and Hillary. And, you know, in the case of, you know, the storied Navy Academy, we've uncovered, the Naval Academy, we've uncovered a major scandal at the leadership level that otherwise would have remained buried, but for your Judicial Watch. And separately, as I said, we're honored to be able to represent this whistleblower. But I want to tell you, as I said, we're able to do it because of you. And so we're honored to do it on your behalf. And I want to thank you again for your support that makes it possible. I encourage you to continue your support. And I hope through this report and other Judicial Watch work, for those of you who aren't supporting us, you're further incentivized to join our cause, join our movement, and support Judicial Watch's efforts to preserve our Constitution, educate the American people about what its government is up to, and stop the bad guys in government from destroying the country. So with that, I'll see you here next time on the Judicial Watch Weekly Update.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.